We're massively in a paradox here in Washington State. Washington State has the highest minimum wage in America, but here's the catch. Seattle rents are rising faster, so fast that even six-figure salaries are having a hard time keeping up. And these salaries aren't feeling safe from rent anymore. We've got a paradox here throughout the Seattle metro. We've got booming wages, but we have massively rising rents and home prices. And they're outpacing incomes in general, and then throw in all that wonderful inflation that we've been seeing. In this video, we're going to talk about wages, we're going to talk about rents, we're going to talk about how they are rising, but things are still feeling unaffordable and unattainable. We're going to talk about the consequences of some failed policies here in Washington State and a way forward for our state. So if you think a raise is going to fix it and save you, I need you to think again. Part 1, let's talk about the Seattle wage boom. Washington State average wages grew 6.8% in 2024 to $95,160. And the tech hubs like the downtown Seattle and over there on the east side, Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland, where we've got the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts, in King County, they drove wages up even higher. 13% in a single quarter. But unfortunately, this is the problem. This massive wage growth is pushed and skewed towards high earners. But what it's doing is it's leaving the retail, the hospitality, the laborers stuck in the $20 to $25 an hour range. Now, I'm not talking skilled labor because we've seen construction actually start to do a lot better just due to the lack of supply. So these averages really sound great on paper. They give politicians things for them to brag about as they're out there on the mic. But what they don't realize is that doesn't apply to you. And for those of you that are new to the channel, I'm Anton Stetner. I've been selling real estate here in the Seattle metro for over 22 years. We've done thousands of transactions. And I love our state. I love our local economy. But we have to make some changes because we're running into some massive pain right now. And I want to see home ownership be attainable, not just affordable, because that means they could shove you into a rental. I want our citizens, our Washington State residents to be able to get into a home. So I'm making these videos to bring to light the details of what we're seeing happening in our market so that we can push back against our politicians and the local government so that we can create more attainable housing in our local communities. And if you like that idea, hit that magic subscribe button, drop any questions or comments you have below, and we're happy to answer them as we go through this video. Now back to the video. The median rent in Seattle was in the $2,700 a month range. And the rent to income ratio is 30.7. So around 31% of your income every month is going to rent. That's officially a massive cost burden. Understand that shelter, whether it be owning a home or renting, is generally speaking one of people's largest financial costs each month. And to make it worse, the vacancy factor in Seattle has been 3.2%, which is just freaking brutal. So it's not a game about just what you earn. It's a game of whether you could even find a place to begin with or find the right place in the right area that's close to your work. The renting versus buying conundrum here in section 3. This is unbelievably brutal. So buying in the Seattle metro, let's assume the median price is around $875,000. That's going to cost you like $6,200 a month, plus taxes, plus insurance, plus maintenance. While renting is going to be on the cheaper side. It's going to be around $2,700 a month, but it's going to be massively more competitive. And unfortunately, this is then creating that divide where renting is becoming about survival and buying is becoming the elite club. And then in places like Bellevue and Seattle, very high demand areas next to the job, the script has really been completely flipped over. It is harder to rent in some of those areas than it is to buy unless you're rich. And what's happening is people are being forced further out of the city and then forced to commute back into the city just for jobs. Then we started creating these policy problems, and that's what we want to discuss here in part 4. The rent cap law said, hey, we're going to put a 10% maximum increase in annual rent. I'll be honest, I'm a landlord. You almost never get to raise your rents 10%. But when they put this rent cap in place, what they've done is they've started to make it backfire. We have received an unbelievable amount of calls since Washington State passed rent control, where the small mom and pop landlord, they own 1 unit, 2 units, 5 units, because they no longer want to put up with Washington State getting more involved in rental housing when we're already a massively consumer protection state. And the mom and pop landlord is the ones who don't raise their rents regularly. They're more likely to leave them lower for longer. And what it's doing is as we push them out, we're left with the corporate landlords. And those corporate landlords are 100% going to raise their rent because they're backed by hedge funds, they're backed by major corporations, they're backed by health insurance companies. So they always raise their rent, they always charge top dollar. So this is literally backfiring and causing rents to rise faster. This was just an idea that made politicians feel good, that bought some votes, that is starting to backfire right in front of us and create more division inside of our state. And we're feeling this massive inflation disconnect. CPI says that rents rose 1.1, but our market data shows that rents have actually risen here between 1.9% to 3.3%. Why? Why does the data show up like this? Because CPI uses lagging indicators of owner equivalence rent and rent, but they're boxcars, so they show up at 12 at a time. So we have rent in the data that is from last year. So the reality is that here throughout the Seattle metro, households are facing even larger rent hikes than what CPI is showing. And I know you're feeling this too. The data says you're fine. The news media says you're fine, but your bank account is telling a different story. Well, what's the future outlook? The future outlook, unfortunately, does not look good. We are forecasting home prices to grow very modestly, and I'm talking like 2% for the state, 3% for the state. As rates trend down, what will happen is more buyers will qualify and demand will increase. So don't expect a price crash to come save you because there's not enough supply and we don't have enough foreclosures. During the great financial crisis in 2008 to about 2012, we did not build enough homes here in the Seattle metro. We built about 80% less homes during that timeline. So you are, depending on how the data is measured, between 2.5 to 4 years behind on housing supply. And when I say housing supply, I'm talking single families, I'm talking townhomes, condos, and apartments or multifamily. It's all of the above. Well, guess what happened to this construction pipeline in 2022? When the Fed magically raised the interest rates, you can see the construction pipeline here in the state of Washington then plummet again. And in 2024, the construction pipeline was half of where it was previously, showing you that future shortages are coming. So mark my words. Rent is expensive now. In 2026 and 2027, because these large multifamily projects take about 3 years to get online. So you go 2022 was the end of them. 23, 24, 25, which puts us into 26. That massive supply of multifamily that we've seen come through starts to dry up, and you are going to see higher than average rent increases. So this sounds doom and gloom, but realize I am an optimist and I believe there is a way forward, but we have to push back. We've got to push back in the way of policy. And you're starting to see things like this. You saw the ADU bill get passed at the state level. You saw middle housing get passed at the state level. That was our state legislatures pushing back against our cities and our counties who are all being NIMBY, saying, not in my backyard, saying, I have a home and you don't deserve to get one. We've got to get our policymakers to streamline the permitting process. It should be the same freaking process in every freaking city and county. I do land development, and when you go in, it's like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. Everyone is different. Everyone has positional authority, and their timelines suck. And so all you do is sit there and burn capital trying to get the project to the end. It's why we are building less homes. Until we streamline the permitting process, streamline the development process, cut the red tape, incentivize construction, figure out creative financing, and help the first-time home buyer for attainable home ownership, we will not fix fix this housing problem here in Washington state. And individuals renting realize this is a short-term strategy because what's happening right now is rents are going to increase. So we got to figure out ways to help our citizens increase their active income so they can save a little bit more money and then go buy a home and get under the property ladder. I hate this divide that I'm starting to see, that you have to be upper class or upper middle class or a tech worker to be able to buy a home here in the Seattle metro. That's ridiculous. Everyone deserves a home with a yard, a cute little fence, and their dog running around the backyard, and their 1.5 kids. So Seattle's not going to crash. Washington State's not going to crash, but it does need to reinvent itself, and I believe it will. And the winners are going to be the ones who adapt, who push back, who get some of these policymakers to see that changes have to be made in order to address the housing crisis that we have here in Washington State, because rent is just too damn high, and it's going to go higher. And the question is what will you do next to speak out to your local politicians and to your politicians at the state level? Because we got to make some changes. I'm Anton Stetner. Hit me in the comments with the things that I missed during this. This is just a quick video, so we can't get to everything. But I'd like to hear from you on how we can make a difference here in Washington State and how we can make a difference together, because rent is too high and home prices are too high.